In December 1971, Médecins Sans Frontières is created. The humanitarian agency, also known as MSF, sets out to be independent and free in both speech and action. It is the start of a long story, a story of many challenges, a story of intense, emotional encounters with populations and patients all over the world. A story of incredible achievements, but also of immense losses and grief. It is a never-ending story of intense internal debates and of self-questioning when faced with the limits of humanitarian action.
Je trouve ça révoltant, ouais. Absolument révoltant. Cette espèce de gros hélicoptère qui se dépose là, qui soulève toutes les tentes, qui chie de la nourriture au milieu et puis tout le monde se jette dessus.
From the day of its creation to today, successive generations of expatriate and national staff have played their part in this adventure and responded to a changing world, and to the need for MSF to adapt itself continuously, always driven by the realities of the field and the needs of its patients. Today, MSF is a large international humanitarian movement. Its members come from all over the world, attracted by the concrete result of medical work and by MSF's attachment to humanitarian principles.
The teams of MSF are made up of people who are coming from all over the world. And in the field, it's always a positive reaction from patients, from teams where MSF is working, when they see that MSF is truly made up of people who come from different cultural backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, and from all over the world. The principles of independence, neutrality, impartiality are not abstract themes created in the West. They are lived and they are understood in other parts of the world. They may have different explanations, they may have different interpretations or ways of being implemented, but they are certainly understood. In all the countries that I've been in with MSF, from Afghanistan to Libya to Iraq, there's a look in the patient's eyes when you ask them what happened to them that is almost not describable, because they're at that moment letting you in their world.
Médecins Sans Frontières does not become an international movement at once. Neither is it immediately a major player on the humanitarian scene. During the first few years of its existence, the organization conducts a limited number of medical interventions. Firstly, following natural disasters in Central America, later assisting Cambodian refugees in Thailand, the victims of the civil war in Lebanon, and Afghan populations following the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. In the mid-80s, MSF responds to the major famine in Ethiopia. An ethical dilemma arises when MSF witnesses the consequences of the Ethiopian government's policy of forced resettlement. Many tens of thousands are dying due to hunger, diseases, and cold. Should the organization stay and assist the patients under its care, or be vocal about the consequences of the massive deportations and the diversion of aid and risk being expelled? Within the young international movement, debate rages, but no agreement is found. One MSF branch speaks out and is later expelled from the country. The other decides to remain silent and continues its medical and nutritional projects. The example of Ethiopia clearly shows the complexity of combining the ethics of medical action with the desire to speak out. In 1988, an MSF team evaluates the situation in Halabja, Iraq, where it witnesses the horrendous effects of the use of chemical weapons against the civilian population.
Quand on a vu une telle catastrophe, quand on en a vu bien d'autres comme Médecins Sans Frontières, une situation de famine ou d'extermination d'une ethnie, je crois qu'il est impossible de rester indifférent. La neutralité politique que Médecins Sans Frontières défend de toute façon et qui restera toujours l'élément de base de notre charte n'égale pas ou ne signifie pas la neutralité de la conscience.
By the end of the 80s, MSF has developed a solid logistical approach to serve its medical projects. Major emergencies follow one after another, and the organization responds time and again by developing its operational capacities further and further. It is the beginning of an era of growth and of risk-taking in a growing number of conflict settings, and also a period of incredible diversification. Building upon the determination, the idealism, and creativity of its members, MSF is present in emergencies all around the globe. In the winter of 1988, an earthquake hits Armenia, a republic in the Soviet Union. About 100,000 people die when their homes collapse upon them. 15,000 wounded need urgent care. More than 500,000 people are homeless. Temperatures drop to 15 degrees below zero.
Le tremblement de terre en Arménie s'est passé le 7 décembre 1988. C'est un tremblement de terre donc d'une magnitude au moins 7, si je me souviens bien, sur l'échelle de Richter. Bon, là, les populations, en quelques secondes, on perd tout. On perd tout quand il y a un tremblement de terre. Son passé, son présent et son futur. Et ça, c'est quelque chose qui m'a vraiment beaucoup marqué. Et en plus, comme c'était l'hiver, voilà, ça rajoutait encore à la détresse de ces populations. Et je me souviens encore de ces gens qui étaient près de leur maison des semaines après le tremblement de terre, qui ne voulaient pas quitter les lieux où ils habitaient dans l'espoir de toujours retrouver des survivants ou de retrouver un souvenir, que ce soit une photo, que ce soit un vêtement. Je me souviens d'un vieux monsieur qui décrochait du seul mur qui restait de sa maison, le cadre, la photo de sa famille. Voilà, ça, ce sont des images très fortes et qu'on ne peut jamais oublier.
The MSF response to the earthquake is massive and the projects very diverse. Shelters for the homeless, mobile clinics, psychological care, physiotherapy, providing artificial limbs for amputees, installing laboratory equipment and dialysis machines, re-equipping maternity wards, even with incubators, building wooden chalets for dispensaries, distribution of clothing, and much more.
Tout ce qu'on a pu faire en Arménie, oui, c'était quelque chose d'extraordinaire pour moi et c'était comme une magie. On était portés. Alors qu'est-ce que c'est que la magie dans ce genre de situation? Pour moi, c'est des individus qui sont sur le terrain. On se sentait portés par un groupe derrière, une énergie qui nous poussait à faire des choses au-delà de ce que MSF avait fait auparavant, au-delà de certaines limites qu'on aurait pu se fixer. La magie et l'énergie positive, je dirais, qu'on a eue sur l'Arménie, bien sûr, elle a été présente dans plein d'autres contextes. Je pense au Libéria pendant la guerre, où on a fait des choses aussi difficiles, comme monter des hôpitaux, référer des patients dans un hôpital qu'on avait monté sous hangar. Après aussi au Sud-Soudan, où là c'était des populations très isolées et il a fallu être très créatif pour pouvoir répondre aux besoins, notamment pendant la crise nutritionnelle de 98. Enfin, il y a plein de contextes. Et dernièrement, il y a Haïti au tremblement de terre et puis encore plus récemment sur le choléra.
From the 80s up to today, MSF has responded to epidemics, major natural disasters, and man-made catastrophes such as wars and population displacement. The response following the earthquake which struck Haiti in 2010 is one of those major operations. Immediately after the earthquake hit Port-au-Prince, the teams described the situation as catastrophic. Needs are enormous. A number of MSF sections send more than 300 expatriate staff to join forces with about 10,000 national colleagues, many of whom have been transferred from other missions. To answer the most immediate medical needs, MSF's first response is to increase its surgical capacities. Other activities soon follow: water and sanitation projects, mental health support, distribution of shelters, and essential non-food items.
Dans une situation d'urgence extrême ou de grande ampleur, il n'y a pas de réponse classique. Il n'y a pas de solutions qui sont décrites dans les guidelines. Et je pense que le côté magique des grosses urgences, il est à ce niveau-là, c'est qu'il donne le libre cours à n'importe qui sur le terrain, juste de créer quelque chose et de faire. Je pense que l'Indonésie, avec le tsunami, il y avait aussi cette magie de vouloir à tout prix innover, créer, faire des recherches, mettre en place des nouveaux outils même, des nouvelles approches. Sur le tremblement de terre du Pakistan, on a aussi développé des nouvelles approches. Je pense par exemple que l'apparition d'un hôpital conteneur chez MSF, c'est dans les grandes urgences. Les hôpitaux gonflables, ce sont les grandes urgences. Je pense que la magie des MSF, elle est là depuis toujours et elle ne risque pas de disparaître. Et c'est l'ensemble de ces initiatives personnelles sur le terrain qui crée cette magie.
But humanitarian aid has its limits. What happens when crimes against humanity are committed? When a genocide takes place in front of our eyes? When humanity fails? In the most horrific way, the Rwandan genocide makes it clear to MSF and to the world that in such extreme circumstances, humanitarian organizations are not able to treat and protect the wounded and cannot even ensure the security of their own staff.
Rwanda, April 1994. Close to 1 million human beings were massacred, Tutsis and moderate Hutus, in a period of 100 days, including about 250 MSF staff. When I think of Rwanda, I think of the 20th of April 1994, when MSF houses in 2 refugee camps were raided. They were set on fire. All our MSF staff were taken out violently. Their identity cards were closely examined for their ethnic groups. MSF Tutsi staff were placed on one side. MSF Hutu staff were placed on the other. The militia then gave the MSF Hutu staff guns and machetes, and they asked to kill their Tutsi colleagues. Those that refused were hacked to death in the most ruthless manner possible. We lost 50 MSF staff that day. So for me, the Rwandese genocide is about Gerard, it's about Everest, it's about Jean-Marie, friends and colleagues who died or were killed simply because of who they were. When I think of the Rwandese genocide, it reminds me of the 23rd of April 1994, when 150 civilians in the Butare hospital, women, children, they were massacred in front of our own eyes. Among them were several MSF staff. Sabine was one of those. Sabine was a Hutu. She was 7 months pregnant. She was a good friend. When they came to take Sabine, I intervened physically. I got between the soldier and I screamed, "Well, Sabine is Hutu. Sabine is Hutu, leave her alone." The soldier opens his back pocket, takes out a piece of paper on which there were several details. It was a list. He looks at me, he looks straight into my eyes and he says, "Doctor, you are right. Sabine is Hutu, but this baby is going to be Tutsi." For the first time in Rwanda, I realized that the child follows the paternal line. So Sabine was killed, and so was her baby. So for me, the Rwandese genocide is about Sabine, it's about her baby, it's about all the other staff we lost. Staff that worked courageously even when they saw death in front of their own eyes. I think the Rwandese genocide is a historical moment for MSF, both as individuals and as an organization, because it was the first time in our history that we actually were witness to the massacre of over 1 million human beings. And in particular, it involved the massacre of close to 250 MSF colleagues. Such losses have been, and it still is, unprecedented in our history.
Only 1 year later, humanity fails again, despite the promises made by the international community. In former Yugoslavia, MSF teams become the direct witness of politics of ethnic cleansing. In June 1995, Christine Schmidt, field coordinator for MSF, arrives in Srebrenica. The town is one of the 6 enclaves that were set up during the war in former Yugoslavia. The war had started in 1992, and since 1993, MSF had been providing assistance to the population of Srebrenica. During the war, many sought refuge there, and the population grew rapidly. When Christine arrives in Srebrenica, 40,000 Bosnian Muslims are trapped inside and besieged by the Bosnian Serb army.
I remember while arriving at a checkpoint, the Serbian checkpoint and then the UN checkpoint, and then walking into Srebrenica, it felt like a door closed behind me, and it felt, and that's what people in Srebrenica said later on, they were locked in. And people felt desperate. Because the concept of the enclave, what was the future, what was the exit strategy? Nobody really knew what was going to come. And would they really be protected like General Morillon promised in '93?
On the 6th of July, the Bosnian Serb army starts shelling the enclave. The shelling goes on for 5 days. Fear and panic take hold of the population. Many wounded are brought to the hospital, where the surgical team is completely overworked, exhausted, and running out of supplies. The MSF team wonders how long they will be able to hold on without assistance from outside.
On the 11th of July, after these 5 days of heavy shelling, it was relatively quiet in the morning, and I thought things get better. But then we realized that part of the population had fled to Potocari, the UN bases, 5 kilometers outside of the main city. The local doctors had asked us, or had informed us, that they would transport the patients to Potocari, the basis of the UN, with a big part of the population, whilst maybe half of the remaining population fled as well to Potocari. We realized that the enclave was empty. What to do? So Daniel and myself and the national staff who was still with us packed the remaining patients from the hospital into our cars and fled as well to Potocari. The blue helmets were present in Potocari, where the population was sitting and waiting for what was going to happen. Then things happened very quickly. The Bosnian Serb army drove with many trucks and buses into Potocari, and on 12th of July started to deport women, children, old people, and started to separate the men. And I did not see anything being done to stop that. And what we know today is that in these days, when a part of the population was still in Potocari, that the massacres had started already. I heard executions in the evening. I heard about a house where men were being guarded. I was in contact with Robert Franken, the deputy commander of the Blue Helmets, and once in a while I shared my concerns with him, especially about this house where the men were being kept. But he said there was no problem, nothing was happening with them. So, no, the population was not protected, the promise was wrong, the promise was false. One of the situations I will never forget is on 13 July I was among the displaced and still looking for patients, and a young Muslim father came towards me with his maybe 1-year-old daughter on his arm, followed by a heavily armed Bosnian Serb soldier. And although not understanding the father, I did understand. He had wanted to give me his child because he knew what was going to happen to him. And he had nobody to take care for his child. So he gave it to me and he left. And, oh God. In this moment I realized that this was a moment where a father was being separated from his child. And indeed, he had been discovered later on in a mass grave. Irma, that was the name of the little girl, remained with us, with the patients.
The little girl is saved and later evacuated. But in the face of the Srebrenica massacres, a question inevitably arises. Shouldn't MSF have recognized the limits of its medical action in such a situation and have left the enclave?
I personally have the very strong opinion that we should have worked in Srebrenica. I never doubt if we should have been there or not. And why is that? Because I believe that our presence made a difference. What is the difference? The difference was there was medical care for the patients who came from Srebrenica hospital and who were in Potocari in the UN bases. So that was our responsibility, first of all. Then we were able to rescue 7 national male staff, which is very important. And the advocacy part, that's important. However, having said that, what difference did it make for the population? The mother who lost her son or the wife who lost her husband, for them, the killing had not been stopped. Nobody was able, or nobody stopped it. And so for the women of Srebrenica, maybe our presence didn't make a big difference. But I still believe that the patient care, the advocacy, the national staff who is still alive today, that is a difference, and that justifies that we were working in Srebrenica.
Did we fail? I think the undeniable truth is that when we look back at the Rwandese genocide, it occurred. And today, none of us has the moral authority to deny ourselves our own share of historical responsibility and guilt for the loss of 1 million lives. So yes, indeed, we failed. The international community failed. We as an organization failed. I as an individual failed, because in Rwanda it was humanity itself that failed. And when humanity fails, we all fail. I think as humanitarians, under these circumstances, we must be led, or we must let our conscience drive and lead our own actions, because we are very likely to be correct.
Les regrets, c'est le Rwanda. Donc oui, les regrets, c'est le Rwanda. Le fait que on estime à 200 membres du personnel des MSF ont été massacrés parce qu'ils essayaient de faire leur travail. Les regrets, c'est le Sud-Soudan, c'est cette famine pour laquelle on a déployé une énergie considérable et dans laquelle on a été très peu soutenu quelque part par la communauté internationale, par même une partie du mouvement. Et donc c'est des regrets où finalement C'est l'expression d'une impuissance face à un drame humain. Et ça provoque de la révolte. Et c'est là qu'il faut clairement rester lucide sur nos propres limites et ne pas se laisser emporter et quelque part être capable aussi de gérer notre impuissance. Ce qui est, dans un mouvement comme MSF, très difficile.
On a souvent des moments de doute quand on est sur le terrain, quand on est face à des dilemmes et qu'on commence à douter si notre action est une valeur ajoutée et va avoir un impact sur les populations ou si ce que l'on fait n'a aucun impact. Je pense que c'est les moments les plus forts de la vie d'un médecin sans frontières, c'est de se dire est-ce que ce que je fais, mon action et l'action de Médecins sans frontières a vraiment un impact sur les populations. Bien sûr, c'est très difficile à mesurer et beaucoup de gens peuvent avoir différents points de vue. Pour ma part, la majorité des contextes dans lesquels j'ai travaillé ont été des contextes de guerre et de conflit. Donc c'est des images très fortes. C'est comment vivre avec ça au quotidien sans être blasé, sans être insensible à tout ça. Et c'est très très dur, parce que les émotions doivent rester à l'intérieur. On ne peut pas vraiment les exprimer, on ne peut pas exprimer sa rage ou exprimer ses émotions, puisqu'on porte le nom de l'organisation sur soi. Et on doit rester neutre, impartial et indépendant. Et ça, c'est très très dur. Je pense que beaucoup d'entre nous ont passé des nuits à se dire mais c'est terrible en fait, c'est un dilemme qui est énorme, on se lève tous les matins et on sait ce qui se passe. Être sur la ligne de front, être à l'épicentre du conflit, ça marque à vie. On gardera les images, on se souviendra toujours de ces moments-là.
Humanitarian workers in an enclave can't stop ethnic cleansing, and a medical doctor can neither stop nor cure a genocide. But faced with such atrocities and crimes, MSF does not want to remain silent.
Action ou pas action, il y a une obligation morale de témoigner sous peine de complicité. C'est ce que nous avons fait pour le Rwanda et c'est ce que nous continuerons à faire. Et je l'espère, parce que le témoignage, au-delà du cri du cœur et au-delà du partage de ce qu'on a vécu, est quand même l'expression de nos valeurs, et que lorsque celles-ci sont mises en défaut et que personne ne réagit, on ne peut pas se taire.
As we speak, people are dying of AIDS. Millions are dying.
Le témoignage ne peut pas être un livre de recettes. Il n'y a pas de guideline pour le témoignage, il y a des balises, il y a un débat permanent sur ce qui doit être dit et quand le dire, mais ça ne peut en aucun cas oblitérer notre obligation de témoigner dans des situations de crimes contre l'humanité en particulier.
Speaking out. It is an integral part of the identity and the history of Médecins Sans Frontières. But as a medical organization, MSF must also continuously adapt its medical approaches to the new environments and challenges its teams encounter in the field. The evolution of MSF's medical approach was, and still is, an essential element of the identity of the organization. During the 80s, MSF launches several structural development projects while at the same time continuing its emergency interventions.
Au démarrage des années 80, on commence une mission au Tchad, un pays qui va être en fin de conflit en 1982 et donc va plutôt être attiré vers la reconstruction pour Médecins sans frontières et qui va donc essayer d'y développer des actions de type plus structurel, de supervision, d'encadrement, d'aide à la gestion, tout ce qui manquait là-bas, et moins d'actions directes auprès du malade. Le problème est que petit à petit, on a vu qu'on s'éloignait du malade, donc avec une grande frustration des volontaires qui ne parvenaient pas à assouvir leurs besoins de traiter et d'être proches des gens qui venaient aider. Et puis, pour le recouvrement des coûts, cela a entraîné le fait qu'on a finalement empêché les gens que l'on essayait le plus d'aider, c'est-à-dire les plus dépourvus, de venir dans nos centres de santé.
Influenced by the major events of the 90s, like the war in the former Yugoslavia, the genocide in Rwanda, the Kosovo War, MSF gradually abandons this structural approach. A large range of very diverse projects are launched.
On a essayé de travailler sur l'eau et l'assainissement, sur la sécurité alimentaire, sur le médico-social, sur la santé mentale, plein d'essais, pour essayer d'être le plus pertinent possible. La difficulté avec cette diversification, c'est qu'il est difficile de tout faire bien et que de ce fait, un bon nombre de ces activités ne trouvaient pas l'expertise nécessaire au sein de Médecins sans frontières et ça nous a conduit vers les années 2000 à mieux sélectionner et à plus restreindre le type d'activité que l'on pouvait mener. On a voulu se rapprocher du malade, les traiter de plus en plus et mieux prendre en compte la dimension totale de sa maladie. Ça a commencé avec le sida, pour lesquels on a développé des programmes de traitement très rapidement dans les années 2000, mais aussi sur d'autres types de maladies infectieuses. Et la logique était de mieux connaître le problème de ces malades à travers nos opérations, de nous développer une expertise à cet égard qui nous permettait ensuite de proposer des solutions mieux appropriées aux environnements dans lesquels ils travaillaient, de les tester et quand elles étaient validées, de les promouvoir vers l'extérieur, que ce soit de façon nationale ou internationalement.
The 1999 Nobel Peace Prize is awarded to Médecins sans frontières.
In the wake of MSF's award of the Nobel Peace Prize, the organization launches the campaign for access to essential medicines.
Our patients are dying not because their diseases are incurable, but because as consumers, they do not provide a viable market for pharmaceutical products.
Its purpose is to push for access to and the development of life-saving and life-prolonging medicines, diagnostic tests, and vaccines for patients in MSF programs and beyond. During the same period, MSF faces an internal dilemma. The question on the table is complex. Should MSF treat AIDS patients by introducing antiretroviral treatments in its projects? For MSF, putting patients under lifelong treatment means taking a completely different view of the concept of time. Not everybody is ready for that, and only the most actively committed people manage to convince those opposing the idea. The first AIDS treatment projects are initiated by the MSF team in Bangkok. It is a highly motivated team, not afraid to use alternative methods. Because the only available drugs in Thailand are far too expensive, drugs are sneaked into the country by air stewards for free. Another project is soon launched in South Africa.
Antiretrovirals should be accessible to everybody because by the time antiretrovirals were available, it was only available whereby people were affording to buy with their own monies. And if you look at that, people who are managing are the only people who should be able to live. And that it is very wrong according to the constitution of our country.
the early days, we were extremely nervous because we had no idea about what kind of result we would get. We opened antiretroviral treatment in May 2001, and immediately people arrived there in masses. Extremely sick people brought on stretcher. But the problem is that we had only treatment available for 180 of them, while we had several hundreds at the end of the year, recorded in our books. We had a selection committee, and we would only treat one upon 4 or 5 out of them, condemning the other one to death, which is not a nice thing to do when you are a doctor. Well, in terms of practical clinical results on those first patients, as I said, they were extremely sick. So it was what was called afterwards the Lazarus effect. We resurrected literally some patients. I think that made a huge impact immediately on the community because, of course, people speak a lot about what is happening to each other, and so the word of mouth spread it like wildfire. We needed to build alliance, political alliance, at international level to force pharmaceutical companies to give up on their patent, at local level to force local government, typically here in South Africa, to go for this intervention. I could give you a good example of this alliance, and that this happened in 2002, when actually we were in a full-blown battle with the Ministry of Health and the presidency. The president's spokesperson put in the newspaper that giving antiretroviral to black people was equivalent to political and biological warfare. We didn't answer this attack directly, but we consulted with the grassroots organization, typically with TAC and with the patient. And we asked them, would all our first patients, the first one that had started treatment, would you be available to write a public letter back to the president? We bought half a page in one of the most prominent weekly newspaper here. They accepted to put their picture there, and they wrote an open letter to the president saying, Mr. President, you must be wrongly advised because actually those pills are not killing us, they are making us feel better.
Today, MSF operates HIV/AIDS programs in 32 countries and provides antiretroviral treatment to more than 100,000 HIV-positive patients. However, major challenges remain.
What we see today is that the main funding agencies, mostly the Global Fund, invented in 2002, is seriously under threat, is completely underfinanced. The future challenges for us is to keep on bringing in new type of intervention so that at no point the political decider of this world can say we are failing here, as they try to do. We have taken them by surprise all the time by showing in the beginning of the 2000s that it was feasible, where they said, no, it's not feasible, that it was affordable. And now they try again to say, oh, we won't be able to pay for this in the long run. And what we have to be able to show is that we can find new type of intervention with even better impact or stronger impact on the HIV transmission so that we are really breaking the backbone of this epidemic. That's MSF role.
It is crucial for all humanitarian interventions to have access to populations, to the wounded, the sick. For MSF, being independent and being recognized as such is an elementary precondition for achieving this goal. But has this always been the case? Is it more important now than it was before?
Independence is essential. Independence is an attitude, the way we work, who we are, how we approach a problem, but it's also a practical necessity. If you're not independent, if you're not fully independent, there are people who will enable you to work in some areas who will refuse to see you. If we weren't independent and determined to be independent, we wouldn't have made it into Chechnya in the first war in 94-95. It's because we decided not to go in with Russian transport planes, which the Russian authorities were insisting that MSF do, that we were able actually to leave Moscow, I think it was the 29th or 30th of December 94, and drive straight down into Chechnya, all the way from Moscow. We met the rebellion deep in the south of Chechnya, and one of the first things, some of the first things they asked us were, you know, who are you? We were the first foreign assistants arriving. Who are you? Who pays for your assistance? Are you linked to any government? Do you have other objectives? Independence is a key issue for the people who control these areas in conflict. And the demonstration of independence that's made in this case in Chechnya can be seen in many other areas, and going back to Angola, to the parts of the Great Lakes, Somalia, and today very much so in Afghanistan and Pakistan. After the 11th of September, in many areas the aid system retrenched, pulled back, and we had the attack on the ICRC delegation in Baghdad. You had the killings of MSF in Badghis in Afghanistan. And basically the whole MSF's approach in the aid system was more in retrench, pulling back. In the last few years we've been able to turn that around basically, and it's thanks to our independence in great part that we've been able to turn that around. We've been able to speak to both sides and gain access. And so even though it's fragile, and we all know, I know that things can go wrong, and we're taking a lot of risks, we are today able to work in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in areas that were unimaginable for us up until 2-3 years ago. The independence and the negotiated access doesn't guarantee you safety or security. I mean, there we have to be quite clear. We're taking a very high level of risks, but it's the best option. It's the only option for us. It's the only option. The other option would be to have armed protection, private militias. Then you increase your chance of being a target. You don't move around, you don't travel, and you're not in contact anymore with the population. You have to close your projects. And this is what many aid organizations are doing in these countries. They're closing or handing over projects, managing them from a distance without any sense of the quality or the result of what they're doing.
It's important that specifically in conflict situations, the structures where MSF is working are completely weapon-free, which means that patients inside feel safe, and they often talk about that. They say, here in this hospital I feel safe because there are no guns allowed. Outside the hospital there are guns. In order to be able to create for patients a safer reality in what is otherwise a violent environment, it's important to dissociate completely from politics, from political wills, from governmental agendas. It's important to have a clarity of intention, and for MSF the intention should always be the provision of medical relief. Humanitarian principles are in danger of misinterpretation and misuse, and in that way an organization like MSF has the duty to reassert, redefine, and put in practice, make operational these principles. Because without making them operational, they're just principles, it's just theory.
During the Libyan War in 2011, MSF entered the enclave town of Misrata.
In Misrata, a boat was hired in order to take out the wounded who had no way out of Misrata. Everything was blocked, there was a siege around the city, and the only way was to carry out a medical evacuation by boat. When MSF was taking these patients out, they were not asked where they were coming from or what happened to them. Your only intention is to alleviate suffering and to provide medical care.
Humanitarian intervention in situations of war and extreme violence can be compared to walking on a tightrope. A permanent struggle to move forward and to reach the goals, while at the same time measuring the risks and trying to keep the right balance. A balance between MSF's mandate and values on the one hand, and the operational dilemmas and compromises which need to be made on the other.
Les dilemmes peuvent être de différents ordres. C'est par exemple au Libéria, lorsque l'on amène de la nourriture dans un village, dans un contexte de guerre, où finalement les populations ne souhaitent pas qu'on vienne leur apporter la nourriture alors qu'elles meurent de faim, parce que cette nourriture attire les rebelles, attire les combattants, et qui viennent faire des razzias dans les villages. Donc le dilemme, c'est par nature le fait que l'aide va être utilisée à d'autres fins que d'aider les populations auxquelles on s'adresse. À Goma, en 1994, où il y avait plusieurs camps de réfugiés, 1 million de réfugiés qui venaient suite au conflit et au génocide rwandais, il y avait une épidémie de choléra, MSF était très présent, et nous avions donc à la fois une urgence, des besoins gigantesques, mais nous savions que cette population était contrôlée par les génocidaires et que l'aide humanitaire qui était apportée, en particulier l'aide alimentaire, était détournée par ces génocidaires, et donc on alimentait quelque part un monstre. La résolution des dilemmes n'est pas donnée, on ne les résout jamais, on trouve une voie qui permet d'aborder au mieux la situation pour que les personnes qu'on souhaite aider soient le mieux aidées possible. Et c'est là soit par une action médicale, soit par un couplage avec le témoignage. Et la force d'MSF, c'est de pouvoir coupler les deux et de créer parfois de l'espace grâce à son témoignage.
Working in a conflict area, in an independent, negotiated way, doesn't mean that you make no compromises. You're still dealing with warlords, rebel groups, etc. And so it's a complicated issue, clearly, and it's not, you can't say that no compromises are ever made. That's the limit of the independent somehow. In fact, one of the ways of describing the compromise that MSF would make would be to say that we will refuse to not treat one group, one ethnic group, or one group in a conflict. And if that means that you're going to have to work in 2 clinics instead of 1, work in 1 clinic where perhaps the needs are not as acute, but nevertheless it's on one side of the conflict, and work in a clinic on the other side of the conflict where the needs are even worse, that's a compromise that we're willing to make for the moment. As long as we are not asked, that's where we draw the line, to only treat one side.
Providing care to the wounded and sick on both sides of the front line is not always possible. Warring parties sometimes refuse humanitarian actors access to the territory under their control.
Pendant toute la période où on était présent en Libye, fournissant une assistance, on n'était que du côté rebelle. Et ça a posé beaucoup de problèmes de conscience. Et la Libye n'est qu'un exemple parmi tant d'autres. Donc, une fois de plus, on se retrouve confronté à ces cas de conscience en interne en se disant, ben voilà, on est bloqué, contraint et forcé de travailler que d'un côté de la ligne de front. Et ça pèse énormément, surtout que le public ou les populations ne sont pas forcément au courant qu'on fait un travail de fond pour essayer d'accéder l'autre côté de la ligne de front.
After lengthy negotiations with the Gaddafi regime, MSF is finally allowed to enter Tripoli in August 2011 and to start operations on both sides of the front line. In all conflict settings, real proximity with patients and direct medical care remains a permanent challenge for all people trapped in the middle of the war zones, and for the large numbers of displaced populations and refugees who have to abandon everything. But there are many more challenges ahead. The need for populations to have access to effective and affordable medicines, environmental issues linked to ever-expanding urbanization worldwide, chronic non-communicable diseases, persistent maternal and infant mortality, the need for medical innovation to treat neglected diseases, the fight against donor fatigue for HIV/AIDS and the necessity to keep up the momentum on treatment and care for HIV/AIDS patients. And of course, finding ways to secure access to the sick and wounded in conflicts without abandoning humanitarian principles, while rejecting the use and manipulation of aid and of aid agencies by warring parties and their leaders as a tool to achieve their political and military goals. In conflict settings worldwide, a principled humanitarian approach is the right one, with only one goal: addressing humanitarian needs.